Shri Shri Radha Krishna Guru Govinda Shri Govardhana Ki Shri Vrajamuni Shri Vrindavan Ki Madhurama Ki Indradyumna Ki Simamrani Ki ISKCON Bhimini Founder Acharya said the whole world Shri Prabhupada Ki Krishna's Marathon Ki Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Govinda Sankirtan Ki Jagannath Subhadra Holiday Ki Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Gaur Bhaktivinoda Glory to the Son of the Day, glory to the Son of the Day, glory to the Son of the Day. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. I'd like to begin by saying how happy I am to be back again at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada and your very beautiful deities, Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev, in the midst of a very auspicious yajna which you are performing, which Prabhupada coined the phrase of Brihat Mridanga, or the great chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra and the glories of the mantra and the whole process of devotional service. In many of his lectures, Prabhupada out of the temple onto the streets. Vaishnavas, their hearts are very soft and very tender. They have a lot of compassion, having been delivered themselves from the mire, the muck of material existence. They naturally feel compassion for those who are still stuck in the mud. So then they know that the best deliverance, the highest welfare work is spiritual welfare work, to go out and enlighten people as to who they actually are and to whom they are servant of, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by taking up that process of devotional service, just like we are doing, one day their good fortune will be to meet Krishna face to face in the spiritual world. So that is the mood of the Vaishnava. And that is Vrihamadanga, particularly book distribution. Prabhupada would note that the sound of the mridanga and the kartals and the strained voices of the kirtaneers, in the old days we didn't have sound systems on the street. You may find that surprising, but in the 70s, and even somewhat into the 80s, we just depended on our vocal cords. I actually developed a polyp on my vocal cords because of chanting so loudly for so many years on the streets of Paris and London and other places as well. I had to have it taken off. So that doesn't happen so much now because devotees have the microphone and the sound system, and the sound carries very far. But Prabhupada liked the term Vrihamadanga, means that the great Mridanga, the sound of Krishna's glories, can go very far through distribution of transcendental literatures. And most of you, I understand, are doing that now. So thank you for carrying on the tradition. It's not a tradition. Some people think that book distribution started in the early 1970s with Prabhupada's order, or really it was the order of his Guru Maharaj. If you get money print books to distribute literatures widely, Prabhupada re-emphasized that. This order actually comes down from God himself. From Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the most recent incarnation of the Lord. Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita. He spoke transcendental knowledge for the benefit of humanity. And it was more or less an oral tradition. Knowledge was received by the disciple from the master through oral tradition. Our main connection with our spiritual master is actually through Shabda Brahma, or transcendental sound. This is our process. We stressed this the other day. Shravanam, Kirtanam, first comes hearing. Hearing destroys ignorance and enlightens us to transcendental truth. So the spoken word was there for millennia, and it was the proper standard because people in previous times, they were much more civilized than we were. They were Aryans. We're speaking particularly about India. Aryan means the most civilized culture. Vachavegam, Manasakrodavegam, Jivavegam, Pashtavegam. People had full control over their mind, full control over their senses, understanding the higher purpose of life to achieve a spiritual destination. They were pure in heart. Not completely pure, otherwise they wouldn't be here, but much more pure than us. So that when the disciple would hear knowledge, Divyagyan, transcendental knowledge from his spiritual master, at first he would assimilate it. The second time he heard it from his master, he would understand it. It's amazing. We're still studying after 45 years, trying to grasp the point that we're not the body. The third time the student in the Vedic age would hear the knowledge, it would become Vijnana, transcendental knowledge. You see how unfortunate we are. To be born in this age means that even if you want to be good, you're forced to be bad, because there's so much bad association in the form of bad people, the media, the atmosphere, what you drink, what you eat. It's all polluting the body, the mind, the intelligence, covering the soul. There's practically no hope for the people of the Yuga, except the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. So this was the case previously. People were born into ignorance, but they became enlightened by the mercy of the Master, just by sitting and hearing transcendental knowledge. And it was passed down from the disciple became the Master, and he enlightened his disciples like that. Evam param parakaptam, through the discipline succession. But with the advent of Kali Yuga, it all got mixed up. People were not pure enough to comprehend or to speak or realize the knowledge, so it took more time. So therefore things were written down. The knowledge was written down. Because if you have the And I watched several of the lessons during the morning. The whole morning the teacher was repeating the same shloka. It was quite a long shloka. Hours repeating. I fell asleep. The students were listening, and by noon, they could all repeat it verbatim and speak the translation perfectly. These were 5 or 6 girl students. So this is the system in Vedic age. You would repeat the shloka, repeat that verse, and then you'd act on that, and then you'd realize it. Tadvidi paripashana. Tadvidi paripashana. Paripashana. That's the first quote. Tadvidi paripashana. Paripashana sevaya. Upadekshati tekena. Dhananastha. Paripashana means that you inquire from the spiritual master, and then sevaya. You act on that knowledge. You inquire, sir, how is this? What is this? And then he gives you the knowledge. But to realize that knowledge, you have to act on that knowledge, to serve the spiritual master. So things had to be written down. Srila Vyasadeva, of course, wrote down Vedas and supplementary literatures of the people of this age. And that is our tradition. Books. It's by the written word that the student becomes enlightened in this age. And it's a very integral part of our Krishna consciousness movement. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself stressed the importance of books. You know, there's 3 prominent instructions he gave to his immediate disciples, the 6 Goswamis in Vrindavan. Everything, the success of this international society of Krishna consciousness, which was surely the vision of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Obviously, he wanted this movement to go every town into his world, so certainly he envisioned ISKCON as it is today, with the supreme commander at the helm, Srila Prabhupada. He saw that. So he ordered the 6 Goswamis to go to Vrindavan to discover the lost places of Krishna's pastimes for the benefit of those who want to go in modern days. He stressed the importance of establishing temples and deity worship for future generations to come to the most holy place in the universe. And then what did he say? You go through the Vedic literatures and you write books on the science of Krishna's consciousness, establishing Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because even to this day, there's a debate who is supreme. Some people, without proper knowledge, they think that some demigods are supreme. There's a constant debate in South India if Shiva or Vishnu is supreme. Like that. But Bhagavatam says that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and we're all his eternal servants. So this was the business of the Goswamis. And they wrote the foundation down, the fundamental scriptures. The first scriptures written by the Goswamis was written by Sanatana Goswami, Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And from that book, all the other books of the Goswamis were written. So we could see that publication of books was established even during the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's an integral part of our tradition. And then soon after Mahaprabhu left, then the next generation, you could say the original second generation. We have our second generation, the term used by the Gurukulis. You're not the original second generation. Second generation was Narottam, Srinivas, and Shamananda. And they were also intimately involved in the publication and the distribution of books. It cannot be denied. We won't tell the story, you know it as well as I do, that after their graduation from the Tola, the school of Jiva Goswami, who was the foremost spiritual personality in Vrindavan after the departure of the other Goswamis, because he was much younger. He had his Tola, and that is where Narottam, Srinivas, and Shamananda were educated. And such good students they were, that at their graduation ceremony, they received honorific names. Narottam became Narottam Das Thakur. Jiva Goswami gave Shamananda the name Shamananda Pandit. And to Srinivas, who was a little elder, he gave the name Acharya, Srinivas Acharya, noting that these personalities were destined to become great spiritual leaders in the second generation. And their very first seva, Pariprashana Seva, they received instruction, and then they had to do seva to repay the Guru, to repay Jiva Goswami. They had to take all the original books of the Goswamis, as many, well, all the original books. Actually, I was told there was only one copy of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Different books like this. They took the original books of the Goswamis, and their seva was to go to Bengal, because that's where the other group of Vaishnavas were. There were the Mayapuris and the Brajavasis. The devotees in Bengal, because Mahaprabhu appeared there, because he asked his mission to go to Vrindavan, devotees naturally collected there. So there were two basic camps of Vaishnavas, but the Bengalis weren't getting the books. Because in those days you didn't have iPhones and fax machines and telephones. No. Everything had to be handwritten and distributed in that way. So their service was to take the books to Bengal and have them copied for quote-unquote, as you could imagine at that time, whatever was mass distribution at that time, nothing like today, of course. But the spirit was there to distribute books far and wide, because the Vrindavan can only be heard from one speaker to the other, but the books can go by way of nature. They can go from one corner of the earth to another corner of the earth, and people can benefit from them. So you see, it's integral, isn't it? Book distribution wasn't something that just exploded of the order of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to our Guru Maharaj, but it actually was an integral part of ISKCON since the time of the creation of our Sampradaya, our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Other scholars, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he elaborated very wonderfully with his transcendental vision, seeing things that were beyond the written word, but that's okay, because Prabhupada said that, for example, the poems of Narottam Das Thakur, the poems of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which are elaborations on our fundamental scriptures, they're as good as scripture. Because these devotees are visionaries. They know these things from birth. They know these things eternally because they're all liberated souls in the spiritual sky. So they can say more that's in the books. Just like one time, Prabhupada cooked some samosas. You call those samosas here. He cooked some samosas and he distributed them to the disciples. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was present and he ate one of those samosas. And he said, Prabhupada, I have never in my life tasted a samosa so good as this. And Prabhupada sort of off the cuff, he said, yes, that's because it's Mother Yasoda's recipe. And Prabhupada said, oh, so how did Prabhupada know Mother Yasoda's recipe? Because Jivan Mukta Sukuchite. These liberated souls come to this world. So sometimes these secrets are shared for the benefit of human society. So devotees like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who some scholars say is a reincarnation of Rupa Goswami, but I won't comment on that. But he wrote for our benefit, and Baladev Vijayabhushana, his disciple, he wrote, Prabhupada comments, it's the duty of senior leaders in the movement, sannyasis or as it may be, they should write their realizations in Krishna consciousness and share with others. Specifically, they should write. And then it came down to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We observed his appearance days recently, so there's no need to go into too much detail. But he's considered the pioneer of the modern day Krishna consciousness movement. He revived Krishna consciousness in Bengal. It was the spiritual heritage, but sometimes it is that those places can become covered over, appear to become covered over. Just like a candle is glowing very brightly, and the light goes out, and it becomes darker. But if you look closely at a candle, when it's burning, the darkest part is right under the candle. You look next time you burn a candle, it's dark around the circle. So sometimes, by the influence of material nature, very difficult to overcome, combat this material. Sometimes actually become covered, not in the eyes of spiritual personalities. Prabhupada said one time, there's a thin film of Maya over the dawn to keep the Maya bodies away, and the impersonalists, and the materialistic people who may go there and think this is not such a nice place to settle down. But the dawn remains always pure. So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was born into this situation. It was a British time in India, and they'd done much to destroy the Vedic culture. And whatever was called spiritual was just hypocrisy. So, practically single-handedly, he revived the Sankirtan movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And instrumental in his reviving the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was to write books on the science of Krishna consciousness. He wrote so many books. There's a long list. But I've been told the list is longer to the number of books that have been lost that Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote. What a crying shame. Just like Nelson Mandela, he wrote a book about your country. Cry, my beloved country. Cry, humanity. That even one sentence, one word, one syllable written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur has been lost to the world for whatever reason it was lost. Terrible. But he wrote enough to revive, and he had that vision. He understood how book distribution is so integral to the worldwide movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he wrote one book called The Life and Precepts of Chaitanya, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he sent it in the mail. He sent it in the mail, just like, it's almost like, how is it possible? He sent it to McGill University in Canada, and he sent wherever it was, and a few other places around the world. And lo and behold, years later, during the glorious times of Prabhupada's preaching, one devotee went to McGill University. He found that original copy sent by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So the point I'm trying to make is to help you understand, you're serving the desire, the integral desire of Mahaprabhu and all the previous acharyas by getting these books out to the people. They're meant to go out into the hands of the people. Many times Prabhupada would chide us, he'd say, what would your 10-minute lecture do? But if someone gets a copy of my book, they're hearing what? They're hearing from the heart of the pure devotee. Prabhupada knows best how to preach Krishna consciousness. One may think, oh, he's an elderly Indian gentleman. He's come to the Western countries. How can he know the proper language and customs and means? No, he's inspired from the heart. Charya Vaishnava Seva. Who's ever been delivered without the mercy of Vaishnava? So Prabhupada was particularly empowered to write. And as his representatives, he's empowering us in particular to distribute. We're the distributors. He's the master, we're the servant. He did the writing. We don't need to add anything. Sometimes I'm embarrassed in this lecture. Better put a tape of Prabhupada on. His words are perfect. And for those who are ready, his words will enter their heart. You have to have that faith. Not everyone who takes a book, well, everyone will benefit, but not everyone will become a devotee. But don't worry about that. Be like Johnny Appleseed. He's an American hero or folk hero, I'm not sure which. But he's famous for going all throughout America in the late 1700s and throwing apple seeds everywhere. They thought he was a little crazy. He walked everywhere through apple seeds. They called him Johnny Appleseed. And now today you can go and you see rows and rows of beautiful apple trees everywhere. Beautiful blossoms in the spring, tasty apples for generations coming down like that. So when you go out to preach and distribute books, so probably give the example. A spark may fall from the fire and land on the water, and it's extinguished. The spark comes out of the fire and lands on the semi-wet grass, and it smolders for a while. And then there's a spark that comes out of the fire and lands on the dry grass. It catches fire. So Manushanam Sahasresu Kaschiditati Shidhaye. Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita that millions and millions of men and women, perhaps one is interested in the science of Krishna consciousness. And out of them, perhaps only one is understood. The truth, that was before the Yuga, ladies and gentlemen. Gita was spoken at the end of the Pura Yuga. That that is the situation in Dwapara Yuga. It's much worse than Kali Yuga. But still, there are persons who are ready to receive this knowledge, and we have to be out there to meet them. And you can't talk very long to a person on the street, in their home, everyone's busy with their sense gratification. You only get a few moments. So rather than your words, put a book in their hand. And in time of need, curiosity, distress, they'll pick that book up and their spiritual life will begin. So that was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's contribution. And his son, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he developed a printing press and was distributing books with his buddy Ahmad. And some of his sannyasi disciples, they used to complain. Puri Maharaj told me this one time. That some of the sannyasi disciples were complaining, we're doing so much preaching, we're giving so much attention to this Abhai. Prabhupada's name when he was a household or young man, Abhai. You're giving so much attention to this Abhai, he's just giving some donations once in a while. And Puri Maharaj said that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati shot back, you be quiet. In the end, he'll do everything. And so it was. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati noted. He knew Prabhupada's heart. I'm sure there's an eternal relationship there. For certain. And he gave him that instruction. If you ever give money to print books. He said this temple in Baghbazar, they're fighting over the rooms. I wish I could just take this marble and sell it and print books and distribute them wide. Papa took that to heart. Instruction to heart. Not immediately, because he was a family man, but in due course of time, by Krishna's will, we know Prabhupada left family life, started back to Godhead magazine, translated Bhagavatam, first canto. He said everything is in the first canto. Sailed to America, and fulfilled the order of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If you look like a young, educated man, the first meeting, why don't you spread the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the English-speaking language? And Prabhupada did. Now we look back, it's sort of almost sounds easy if you repeat the story many times. But no. Prabhupada told us one time, he said that my first year in New York was so difficult I cannot even tell you of the problems I had in that first year. But he persevered, having faith in two things. He said, the holy names and the instructions of the spiritual master. And so books were printed in English, and then Prabhupada went above and beyond the call of duty. It's a military term. A soldier has a duty, it's never easy. But sometimes soldiers, they go above and beyond the call of the duty for their country and patriotic pride. They do something amazing, they get a Medal of Honor. So Prabhupada gets the ultimate Medal of Honor, the prestigious honor of being the best representative of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this modern age. Because he not only has books being distributed in English, but French, German, Spanish, Dutch, Zulu, Akulugula. That's what Prabhupada did. He went above and beyond the call of duty. He has distributed books in every major, probably minor language of the world, giving people ample opportunity if they so desire to perfect their lives. So we are duty bound to continue that tradition, this integral part of the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu book publication and distribution. I've summarized it, I don't want to go on too long. But just to impress upon you the baton that we've all inherited. We can't let our acharyas down. We can't let Mahaprabhu down. We can't let Jagannath Subhadra Baladev down. We can't let the divine couple down. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nayanga, in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They have worked so hard against all odds to establish this movement, and they're all gone, quote unquote. Of course, they're there to give us mercy. But this modern day generation, the first generation, now second and third, is also coming. We've inherited that baton. Like you see the race, you have the race and the four men run the race, right? So the first group goes, they come around, they hand the baton to the second group. And then the fourth group, they get the baton, and they have have to deliver. So we're all the acharyas have. It's like one time Prabhupada said, Lord Chaitanya, or rather Lord Ramachandra, he conquered Ravana, whose name means he who makes this universe scream with terror. He conquered Ravana and his hordes of Rakshasas with monkeys and bears. So Prabhupada said in the same way, I am conquering the world with my disciples. But he loved his disciples. Prabhupada, whenever he had the opportunity for association, he didn't necessarily go back to India, go back to Gaudiya and sit with his godbrothers, although he respected many of them. He stayed with his disciples. He appreciated their sacrifice in giving up, the sins of the ways of this world, and boldly taking up the process of Krishna consciousness and following their vows to chant 16 rounds a day, and to help him serve the mission of the order of his Guru Maharaj. Prabhupada loved his disciples. He even called one of his disciples who established the Rath Yatra in America a saint, Dayananda Prabhu. He only lived 9 years in this movement. But for his seva, Prabhupada said he's ISKCON's first saint, and his picture should be placed in every Rath Yatra card. And he says in a posthumous letter that if you have any material desires, you have gone to Shwargaloka to fulfill those desires, and from there you can transfer yourself to the Loka. But, he said, because I heard you were hearing the chanting of Hare Krishna at the moment of death, it was a tape recording of Prabhupada singing, I say you've gone to Krishna Loka. So, yes, we're following, but just as bell metal can be changed into gold by a mystical process, so any sincere being, irregardless of how sinful he is, if he can abandon sinful ways and take up the authorized process of Krishna consciousness, he can become Paka Brahmana Vaishnava, empowered to represent the Supreme Lord. To the degree that our hearts are cleansed, to the degree that we are surrendered, we become more valuable in the hands of Prabhupada to continue the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And one limb of that ISKCON's body is book distribution. It shouldn't be something that was historically going on in the 1970s when Prabhupada was here. As it's been going on for 500 years, it has to continue going on. And we have to take up the service, every one of us. It's not just the brahmacharis and a few householders, who can find some time. Every man, woman, and child should participate, if not actively, but by supporting the book distributors. This is the time of the year. This is the time of good cheer, as the Christians say. It's a holy time. We'll dovetail it. It's Jesus' birthday. Okay. Prabhupada said he's one of our spiritual masters. He went so far as to say. So it's a time of cheer and goodwill. Jesus said it's better to give than it is to receive. That's very much our process. Very much our process. Better to give than it is to receive. And we can find time. My mom used to joke, she used to feed us full, and then, I can't eat another bite. And then she brings some Jello. And the motto of Jello in the 50s was, there's always room for Jello. And we'd eat the Jello with the ice cream. So there's always some room to share your good fortune with others. And we need an organization to do it, an institution, because on our own, it's not so easy. But with a good temple president, like you have here, and a history of how book distribution goes on, and books written by my godbrothers like Vaisheshika Prabhu, our family business, which every ISKCON devotee should read. It should be mandatory reading to instill that fire of Sankirtan in your heart and help you to contribute in any way you can. If you can't go out, you can babysit. If you can't go out, you can cook for the devotees going out. But this is the spirit of camaraderie which brings this feeling of a genuine spiritual family to a yatra. A family that prays together, stays together. So what's the prayer in this age? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Krishna Varnam Tusha Krishnam Shanmupam Krishnaparshidam Yagna Sankirtan Toya Yashantihi Shumedashava. Our prayer is a congregational prayer. We chant very loudly at the top of our lungs for the benefit of all other living entities. And the best way to do that in the month of December is to go out on book distribution. You have an advantage down here. You should win the worldwide book distribution marathon because it's not cold. Cold for you in July and August is something like around 10 degrees or something. Cold right now in Russia is 25 below zero. And still the Russian devotees are out there distributing books. This is an opportunity to take a quantum leap in your spiritual advancement because we are meant to share Krishna consciousness with us. When the sharing spirit dies in ISKCON, ISKCON's finished. If we become smarta brahmanas and just stay in the temple and ring the bells and study to become enlightened, and those poor fools and rascals out there, they're dirty, they're unclean, we don't want to associate. They're ignorant. That's smarta brahmana. Then ISKCON dies. No, we're not better than them. We are not better than the people living in the townships. We're not better than the aristocrats, living in posh buildings in Reservoir Hills, the intellectuals in the universities. No, we're a little more fortunate than them. It was only moments ago in cosmic time that we stumbled across this movement and somehow got caught in the tsunami of Prabhupada's mercy. We're just a little more fortunate, and we become more fortunate when we share with others. I'm always saying this, we make progress in Krishna consciousness by blessings. What is our chanting? Our chanting is actually mercy, 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 mercy. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. And if going out and preaching Krishna consciousness is good enough for God, the Mahaprabhu on Sankirtan every day would share the good for it. If it's good enough for the Panchatattva, for Narottam, for Srinivas, Shamananda, Vishwanath, Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Baladev Bhikti Bhaktivinoda Thakur, all Prabhupada. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. And it's what they want. It's what they want. That's when they came to this world, the divine personality of Godhead or his servants, they came with a particular purpose in mind. And if you facilitate that purpose, you become endeared to them. And if you become endeared to Prabhupada, to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Gorkishwaradas Babaji, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Jagannath Daswati, you don't know how much mercy you're going to get. So if you just try to share during this month, the channel's open to talk about channeling. This is real channel. If you want channel, if you want to get mercy from the previous acharyas, who would want it? Go out during the month of December and distribute a book. Even if you distribute one book, the whole marathon, that's okay. Prabhupada said one time in a lecture, listening today, that when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati sent the brahmacharis out, if a brahmachari only distributed one pamphlet for one paisa, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would say, "Thank you, young man. I appreciate it very much." Thank you, young man. I appreciate it very much. You distributed one book for one paisa. Because it all adds up. Sankirtan means the complete glorification of the Lord. Everyone has their contribution, and everyone gets the mercy. We need mercy. Life is short and then you die. So we should be, this phrase has been coined, you're just going to fire it up. Are you fired up? We can be fired up. And most of the year we don't have time like that. Now is a great opportunity. Go to your temple destiny. Go to your Namada leader. And after this evening's program, the Maharaj speaks when we have kirtan. You fall on your knees and you beg your authority. Please make arrangements that I can do some book distribution or I can assist the Sankirtan movement during this Christmas marathon of 2018. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Baladev ki. Transcendental book distribution ki. Oh, payment!
instruction, I will not come down and nobody should come to my room to bother me. So we had lunch without Maharaj, and then I went to his room to bother him. And I said, are you going to go to Phoenix tonight? And he said, you know, I've really been feeling bad. And he said, maybe if I just take a full rest, you know, it'll be good for the weekend to be with all the devotees. Then he said, what are we supposed to speak about tonight at Phoenix? And I told him that we were supposed to have some discussion about encouraging devotees to participate in book distribution. And I was so surprised that when Maharaj, when he heard this, he said, you know, I think I'll come. Because really, he hasn't been feeling well. But when he just got this idea that he could inspire the devotees to assist Srila Prabhupada in his mission of book distribution, he sort of caught on fire and came over and gave such a wonderful lecture tonight, you know, the history of book distribution and how it's come down from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and through the entire Guru Parampara, and the one who really did the most magnificent work in spreading the books throughout the world has been Srila Prabhupada. So I find that very inspirational that Maharaj, you know, he picked himself up just so he could come here and speak to us. And I'd like everybody focus over here. You've seen the curtains close on the deities 10 million times, or the gates close. Maybe are they going to close up now? I think if the Pujari could just go ahead and do that, because everybody here is about as weak-minded as I am. And they're totally distracted. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki. So Indradyumna spoke to us. And I would just like to get an impression from all of you who are sitting here tonight. How many of you all have made a plan to do something for book distribution during the month of December? If you made a plan, put your hand up. It's great. That's great. But there are a lot of people who didn't put their hands up. And I'd like to request everybody to seriously think what you can do. Maharaj, you mentioned how, you know, most of the people here, you have your job, you have your work, you're not going to be able to book distribution yourself. If that's the case, everybody here at the temple can sponsor some books to be distributed. Everybody could, you know, give a few $100 grand, you know, to purchase, you know, a number of books that could be arranged to be distributed. More than that, all of you could, you know, make different teams, and you could go out for just say one day of the week, see how many books you could distribute. How many people here have ever gone for Sankirtan before? A lot of people. It's ecstasy. it's just about the most ecstatic service that you could engage in the Krishna consciousness movement. In fact, myself and my good friend, Shiva Swami Maharaj, we often sit and we talk about all the headaches that we have, involved in managing different aspects of ISKCON. And we say, gosh, wouldn't it just be wonderful if we could go back to the days when we were on the street just selling Srila Prabhupada's books, and the mercy that we all experienced by distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. I've heard His Holiness Indradyumna Maharaj tell so many ecstatic stories of when he was a Sankirtan devotee, and the risks that he would take to go out with Srila Prabhupada's books. And I was telling somebody just the other day, we were talking about our history of preaching in Central Asia. There's one country called Uzbekistan. Has anybody ever heard of Uzbekistan before? Nobody's heard of Uzbekistan. Can anybody tell me where Uzbekistan is? Does anybody know where Kazakhstan is? One time I had a problem in Kazakhstan, and I was in Washington, D.C., and participating in a congressional hearing. And one of the United States senators walked up to me and he said, "Where the hell is Kazakhstan?" But Uzbekistan is another, these are like the countries of the former Soviet Union, and all the people who live in those countries are Muslims. And we've been doing a lot of preaching there for the past 20 or 25 years, and organizing the devotees distribute a lot of books in those countries. And those people, they become Vaishnavas. They become very first-class Vaishnavas. So I was telling a story the other day about how some terrorists, this is a long time ago, back around somewhere in the mid-90s or the late 90s, some terrorists started setting off bombs in the capital city of Uzbekistan. It was called Tashkent. And because of that, the president of the nation, who was a dictator, he immediately said all religious institutions are banned. And that was like all Muslim religious groups, all Christian religious groups, and we also, ISKCON, we became banned. And our registration was taken away. And the president, he was going on television, and he was so adamant that he wanted to stop religious, spiritual thought, these ideas from spreading, that he said, if the security forces or the police of our nation catch anybody on the streets of Uzbekistan distributing a religious book, for the first offense, the penalty will be 7 years in prison. And 7 years in an Uzbek prison is worse than going to Patala. So there was this real fear in the country. But still, devotees, whenever they had the opportunity, they would go out and try to distribute some books. And at that time, I was cultivating a family, and they've been my friends there for many, many years. Very high-class family in Uzbek society. And the family I was cultivating, the older sister, her son married the daughter of the president of Uzbekistan. So when I was in Tashkent, I requested those people, why don't you have a dinner and then we invite, your nephew, and we invite his wife, the daughter of the president, to come for dinner, and then we'll just sit and we'll talk, and somehow or other we'll be able to preach. And they said, good idea. So they did it. And we had an Uzbekistani dinner. And an Uzbek dinner is a dinner, it takes at least an Uzbek dinner takes a minimum of at least 5 hours to consume. And it's not that because there's so much food, but everybody sits at the table and there's conversation. And some senior person in the family is appointed, that his role is that the conversation will never stop over the period that everybody is there. So it's like really a time for not just eating, but a time for dialogue and a time for discussion with others. So all night long I was preaching to the president's daughter and to her husband. And at the end of the night, her name was Lola. And at the end of the night I said, Lola, somebody told me that tomorrow is your mother's birthday. And she looked up and she said, yes, how did you find that out? And I said, oh, somebody told me. And I said, Lola, I have a gift for your mom. And she said, really? What is it? And then we brought out 2 big boxes that were full of each and every one of Srila Prabhupada's books that had been printed in Russian and Uzbek language. And all these boxes were beautifully gift wrapped. And I said, Lola, could you take these home to your mom tonight and give them to her? And she said, certainly. So the president of Uzbekistan said, first offense for distributing a book, 7 years in prison. And we sent every one of Srila Prabhupada's books to the president's palace that night so that Prabhupada's books could be in his home and benefit his family. So just think of how you can participate. And it's really something which all of us should do. Because our lives, all of our lives, have been changed by the instructions of Krishna that we've received from His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. In the Bhagavad Gita itself, Lord Krishna says that there is nothing as sublime and there is nothing as pure as transcendental knowledge. And he says that in the past, many people climbed aboard the boat of transcendental knowledge and they sailed to the other side of material existence by receiving the messages of God. And then we have received those messages of God through the lips of God's pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, because he is translated very faithfully. And he's given us the commentary that we can read, and such the knowledge of God, the divine wisdom of God, has become understandable to us by Srila Prabhupada's ability to communicate it to us. Srila Prabhupada worked his whole life. He was a family man translated the books. It was his greatest ecstasy. I mean, you all know that statement. Prabhupada says that his purports are my private ecstasies. So we should take responsibility. And we should try to help out in any way that we possibly can. Take Srila Prabhupada, take Lord Krishna's words explained by Srila Prabhupada, share them far and wide. Give to everyone. And this will certainly, if we do this, it's like Maharaj was citing this verse, Tadvadi Pranipatena Pariprashnena Seveya, Upadekshanti Tajjnana, Ganinas Tattadarshana. And he brought up the points that are presented there. One is humility, and one is seva, and one is inquiry. And I think out of appreciation, Srila Prabhupada, all of us should, take the distribution quite seriously. It was dear to Srila Prabhupada, and there's so many different people sitting in this room who have spiritual masters who are disciples of Srila Prabhupada, and book distribution is dear to them. So if we accept this sacred service and if we participate, then by the grace of Prabhupada, by the grace of our spiritual masters, they will share, we can ask questions, and they will share with us many of the secrets of Krishna consciousness. It will be necessary for us to go to the level of advanced bhakti. So please take it seriously. Everybody make a plan, contact Govinda Prabhu, or contact whoever is responsible for the BBT over here in Phoenix. Either contribute, take some books yourself. Indradyumna Maharaj, he mentioned that it's the holiday season. Everybody can just buy a stack of Bhagavad Gitas and take them to your workplace. Pass them out to your colleagues at work. Or any book. Or buy books and pass out to your relatives who haven't taken up Krishna consciousness. But somehow or other, assist in this great yajna of the Brihapradana and sharing the instructions of